The key focus of the G7 summit was clearly the West Asia conflict. G7 leaders stated their desire to see the conflict come to an end, even though they have supported Israel largely, but they've also asked for a certain de-escalation to happen. G7 leaders, while echoed President Trump's stance on no nuke for Iran, have also called Iran as a sponsor of terrorism. On the West Asia conflict, the leaders reaffirmed their support for Israel and claimed Israel has a right to defend itself against terror attacks, but calling for immediate peace and stability in the Middle East and in the region. Amid all of this, listen in to what's been happening at the G7, especially with regard to what the world leaders are saying.
G7 leaders also reiterated our commitment to the pursuit of peace and stability in the Middle East. Made clear that Iran is the principal source of regional instability and terror. And we've been consistently clear that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. We urge that the resolution of the Iranian crisis leads to a broader de-escalation of hostilities, including a ceasefire in Gaza.
Nous ne voulons pas un Iran qui se dote de l'arme nucléaire ou qui ait ses capacités balistiques. Mais je pense que la plus grande des erreurs aujourd'hui, c'est de chercher, par la voie militaire, à faire un changement de régime en Iran. Parce que ce sera là le chaos. Et donc la responsabilité qui est la nôtre, c'est de reprendre au plus vite des discussions pour permettre justement de redonner un cadre à la question nucléaire et à la question balistique. C'est constamment ce que la France fait depuis 10 ans.
All right, joining me now is Gaurav Sawant, who continues to track what's the latest on the G7 summit. Gaurav, tell me this. Can we say that Israel-Iran clearly was the big highlight, even though I'm sure there were other agendas discussed among the G7 countries, but the West Asia conflict clearly was the highlight?
The spiraling tensions between Israel and Iran was one of the hot button issues, perhaps the most important issue that leaders grappled with at G7. Canadian Prime Minister Mike Carney spoke of the efforts to dial down tensions, but made one thing very clear: Israel had a right to defend itself. Iran was expected not to have a nuclear program, and especially no nuclear weapons. The tension that's on, G7 countries are grappling with those issues, but the United States of America has made it very clear that Iran has to surrender. That's the terminology used by President Donald Trump. But if you notice what Emmanuel Macron said he expects that there would be a ceasefire and that President Trump will play a very critical role in bringing Iran to the negotiation table and subsequent to the ceasefire. So this is where it does appear that both the US and France or G7 partners are not on the same page on the road ahead. However, when you look at action on ground, the manner in which there are reports of the US Navy, 3 aircraft carrier battle groups, including Nimitz and Carl Vinson, moving towards the Mediterranean Sea, reports of at least 30 mid-air refuelers and tankers and F-16s and F-15s and F-35s fighter jets being taken to West Asia, and of course the B-2 bombers with their GBU-57 heavy bombs being brought into that region. Now all of that is an indication that the next 24 to 48 hours will be extremely crucial, even as Israel and Iran continue to pound each other's territories.
But Gaurav, I need to ask you about the statement that is clearly unanimous in nature from the G7 summit. All the leaders in support of Israel, all of them calling Iran a sponsor of terror, and yet expecting that perhaps there could be de-escalation. Tell me more about that.
Rising tensions in West Asia have been a cause for major concern for G7 countries. This directly impacts global economy, global supply chains, and that is why G7 countries, their entire effort was to ensure that those tensions could be dialed down. Of course, American President Donald Trump had a completely different take on it. He, of course, left the G7, went back to the Situation Room in White House, and information that came in after that was movement of US military hardware to West Asia. The manner in which you have tankers ferrying, escorting or mid-air refueling in terms of their F-16s, their F-15s, the F-35s. So fighter jets are being moved to West Asia. 3 aircraft carrier battle groups are being moved to West Asia, to that entire region, including Carl Vinson and Nimitz. And you have the B-2 bombers with their GBU-57. So the indications are very clear. The B-2 bombers are the only aircraft, the stealth bombers, that can be used to target Iranian nuclear facility at Fordow. That's the only place which cannot be targeted as effectively with the military hardware that Israel has been using so far. Therefore, the entire focus does indicate that the next 24 to 48 hours may see US either use its military hardware as pressure tactics to get Iran to come to the negotiations table and give up its nuclear program, even in the form of enrichment of uranium on its soil. This is something that Iran says is just not acceptable to it. But after the damage that's been caused in the past 5 days, and the killing of military leadership in Iran, it remains to be seen whether Iran will now be more open to negotiations on this aspect. However, Iran has also pounded several areas inside Israel. So all of that is an indication that West Asia tensions are only set to spiral in the days ahead.